So good morning. How's everyone doing this morning? Enjoying, getting ready to enjoy, or I guess this is my first session today, so I guess I'm getting ready to enjoy the second day, full day of Spring 1. We're here to talk about client-side UI, JavaScript goodness today, the client-side Smackdown. I'm Craig Walls, project lead for Spring Social, written a little book or two about Spring, and there's how you can follow me on Twitter if you're interested in following me at Habuma, or that's my personal Twitter where I tweet a few technical details here and there and a few complaints about airline travel. But the other one, if you're interested in the Spring Social project itself, you can follow what I post there at Spring Social. Now, what about you guys? I don't expect every one of you to give an introduction for yourself, but I'm a little curious by a show of hands. How many of you consider yourselves a JavaScript expert? Yeah, it's a few hands, and I'm willing to wager, I'm not going to say you're lying, but I'm willing to wager that at least one or two of those, you're probably maybe a little bit inflated on that, because I don't really consider anybody a JavaScript expert. It's a hard language to master, and it's a hard platform to get your head around. I certainly don't consider myself a JavaScript expert. How many of you consider yourselves, pretty skilled at JavaScript? How many of you consider yourselves a JavaScript newbie? Good number of hands. How many of you have written your own JavaScript framework? Oh, there's a handful of them there. I'm actually surprised. I thought everyone had written their own JavaScript framework. Okay, so it's good to know there's some of you who haven't yet, but I suspect you will given time. I think that's kind of a rite of passage for JavaScript developers. Well, the thing is, everybody, has experienced JavaScript in some shape, form, or fashion over the years. I mean, writing web applications, you can't avoid it. This talk is talking about how to take that and kind of amp it up a little bit and see how you can build richer applications with that. Well, the thing is, JavaScript is for real. It's been around for a long time, and a friend of mine, he used to present a talk called JavaScript, There's a Real Language in There, and I thought he was just insane. But I was one of those people who was a newbie to it, and I just didn't, I used it for some just really hackish validation on the client side, which it really wasn't even good validation, and that's about all it was good for. And he kept talking about it being a real language, and I would say, yeah, whatever. And but it really is deep down a really good language. There's some really good stuff in it, and there's even these. It's growing up. There's these full ecosystems of developer tools and frameworks and libraries that have emerged over the last few years and continue to emerge. And as I said, I'm sure every one of you will eventually write one of these as well. And it's becoming a real thing. It kind of feels like, for those of you who were around at the beginning of the Java time period, it feels like the same sort of thing early on. It's a little bit of a Wild West kind of exploration of a language and a platform, but we're starting to see these MV star frameworks, and I'll explain what the star means in a moment. We're seeing those grow up, and if you remember back in the early days of Java, everybody had their own web framework. I was responsible for participating in the development of one of those, and pretty soon after a while it sort of coalesced around a certain number of open source frameworks like Struts, and then eventually Spring MVC. We see a lot of templating options. The templating options are important because it's nice to be able to write some content into the DOM of your page, but it's not good to necessarily write it directly into the page using JavaScript. So there's some templating frameworks that have emerged, and there's several of those as well. I will touch on those briefly this morning. Dependency injection. This is a Spring conference. Spring is all about dependency injection. So the question is, well, can I do dependency injection in JavaScript? And yes, you can, and there are some dependency injection tools and libraries and frameworks out there for JavaScript. Alternate languages. JavaScript's a great language. I like it a lot. Some people feel uncomfortable with it. And so there's other languages that have emerged, things like ClojureScript and CoffeeScript. And if you want to, and I'm really pushing the definition of an alternate language here, if you want to call it GWT, a Java language for JavaScript, you can do that. I'm a little uncomfortable saying that, but somebody's going to mention it, so I'll go ahead and acknowledge it. But JavaScript's a great language. It's largely a functional language. That's what it really leans itself toward, although you can write some object-oriented code in it as well, whereas something like CoffeeScript completely acknowledges that objects are good and it treats functional as a secondary approach to development. On the other hand, ClojureScript takes the other approach, and it's fully functional and not really object-oriented at all. Modularity. We've acknowledged that modularity is a good thing, and if you look at other platforms like .NET has a fairly decent approach to modularity. Java has a fairly good approach to modularity in the form of OSGI, although other attempts have been made over the years to supplant that with more refined JSR approaches to that. OSGI is a good approach to modularity. With JavaScript, we recognize that modularity is a good thing in JavaScript, and there's things growing up around that. Testing, very important. How many of you write tests? And the correct answer is, okay, if you're not writing tests, you should be. And one of the places where it's been historically difficult to write tests is on the client side. But there's some great JavaScript testing stuff coming out. We'll touch on those briefly later on. It's not really the topic of this talk, but I'll mention a few of those options. There's build tools. They're like, the equivalent of Maven or Ant or Gradle. There's IDEs to some extent, or some of the existing IDEs that we're familiar with. They are offering some really good JavaScript support. There's debuggers in the form of Firebug and the Chrome developer tools, and there's really some awesome stuff out there. And JavaScript's growing up. And for those of you who don't consider yourself a JavaScript expert, I don't get paid a dime for saying this. I just think it's a great thing to look into. The best way to get your head around the good parts of JavaScript is to read the book from Douglas Crockford called The Good Parts. It's fortunately only about that thick, which tells you about how many good parts there are in the language. But the good parts are really good. So what does this have to do with Spring? Okay, this is a Spring conference, right? And some Groovy and Grails across the hall. This is a Spring conference, though. Why are we talking about JavaScript? What gives? Well, nothing directly. I mean, Spring has some pieces and features that kind of have some JavaScript feel to them, but really the fact of the matter is this has nothing directly to do with Spring, but indirectly it does. The world's changing. We're writing more and more richer applications and allowing the server side to focus on the processing and less on the rendering of the page. And the familiar desktop browser we've been working with for years is being brought up side by side with tablets and iPhones and Android phones and what have you. And the experience the user is getting is going to be different on each of those devices. It's going to be the kind of thing where you don't necessarily want to do a page-oriented approach. And even if you did, you might find yourself wanting to do even a native mobile application, in which case you have some options out there for working with JavaScript and these JavaScript libraries. But Spring is still a really good component for the server side of these client UIs, whether it's in a traditional browser or if it's on an iPhone. It doesn't matter. Calling back to the server, persisting some data, processing that data, pulling up some data from some data source, referencing some third-party API. These are things that Java and Spring on top of Java are really good at doing, and JavaScript less so. And so JavaScript can sit on the client side, consume these REST APIs via AJAX calls, and let the server side handle that. And you have all sorts of options on the server side, but this is a Spring conference. I'm a Spring developer. I'm a big fan of Spring. It should be obvious my choice for doing those REST APIs is going to be Spring MVC, giving you everything that Spring ever has to offer. And I just very much must make reference to Adrian's keynote last night, where he pretty much demoed this is more or less the same story, using JavaScript on the front end, using Spring to provide a REST API on the back end. So, okay, what's wrong with plain JavaScript? I actually had somebody ask me this question about a month ago when I was talking about this topic. They said, why do I even need these frameworks? I'm really good at JavaScript. I know JavaScript really well, he says. I'm just going to write it in plain JavaScript. I don't need these libraries or frameworks. They just add bulk and complexity to the process. Well, it's true. You can write a really rich application using just plain JavaScript. I've done it. I've been a part of a team several years ago where we were on the cutting edge. We weren't quite as cutting edge as Google was with this, but we were right on their heels. We were doing some really interesting things with JavaScript, drag and drop and all sorts of cool stuff. And looking back on that, it was a fun experience. I geeked out quite a bit, but the fact of the matter is that code sucked. It was horrible. And it's because we're working with a really low-level language when you're working with JavaScript. There's really nothing to help you with project structure. There's nothing to help you with model validation or persistence. There's nothing to help you with routing and getting the user around through your apps. There's nothing directly to help you with events. I mean, JavaScript certainly has event support in it, but it's up to you to kind of deal with those events. Nothing to help you directly deal with the DOM manipulation easily. And templates, if you want to write something to the DOM, you're going to be writing it yourself. You're not going to have the benefit of using templates to help you with that. And certainly no help with modularization. Think of it this way. If you were around when in the early days of Java, imagine trying to write, imagine even now, trying to write a web application with nothing but the core JDK. Give it a shot. That's your homework tonight. Go give that a shot. Try it out. Tell me what it's like. That's about like what it's like writing a front-end rich client application with just JavaScript. It can be done. It's just very, very painful. Well, then this same gentleman said, well, that's fine. I understand what you're saying. I'll just use jQuery or MooTools or something like that to help me with some of these problems. Yes, jQuery is a great option. It brings you a step up. It abstracts the DOM manipulation to a great degree. It gives you some help with event handling. It gives you some help to some degree with data binding and whatnot. And of course, it helps you a little bit to some degree with binding data to the view, I guess is what I meant to say. But it gives you no help with modularization, no help with project structures. And the one thing you're going to find if you use jQuery a lot is you're going to find yourself stuck in this nightmare of callbacks. And suddenly that not only does your project have no structure, your code itself has a certain limited amount of structure in it because you just get callback after callback and callbacks that are calling callbacks, and it's just nightmarish. Very much a spaghetti code, not in the traditional sense of the term, but very much a form of spaghetti code, in my opinion. So, again, I challenge you to go off and write a web application using the core JDK plus Apache Commons. I'll give you that much. I mean, it gives you a little bit above what the core JDK offers, or a little bit above what the core of JavaScript offers, but not much. It's still a good thing. You're still going to use jQuery. jQuery is still going to be at the heart of some of these frameworks and libraries you use, and you still will occasionally use it directly, but using it by itself is just not really what you want to do. Well, here's the thing. Here's the short list. There are a lot of good choices. This is the short list of options. And I only give you this lengthy list here because every time I've talked about this before, I've only given about 4 or 5 options, and somebody inevitably says to me, well, what about my favorite framework? Well, I'm sure your favorite framework's not on, somebody's got a favorite framework that's also not on this list, and I apologize for that. I can't list them all. As I said, everybody has written one, and you guys will write one eventually too. And this list would just be insanely long. But I picked out a handful that I was aware of, a handful that I've looked at. Most of these I've at least spent a few minutes getting to know. I can't say I'm an expert at all of them, or really at any one of them, but I'm confident with a few of those, but I've just glanced at a few others. Some of these I'm a little iffy on whether I would even categorize them in the same category as some of the other ones like XJS. Great framework, however. It's debatable on whether it's MVC, but whatever. It's still a great option. Some people really love it, and I support that if they're in favor of it. They're all good choices, but they're all good for different reasons. It's really hard to pick a favorite here. It's kind of like saying, well, who's your favorite child? You know, you can't. You love them all, but you love them for different reasons and in different ways. And not that you love anyone anymore, you just love them for differently. And so when it comes to this set of choices, I can't say I've seen one that I don't like. I really do like them all. I just like them differently. And it really depends on which one fits the style and the type of project you're working on. And so that's kind of what the bulk of this talk is about, is going to help you become familiar with some of these options and help you make those choices. To make those choices, we're going to use a little bit of a criteria here. We're going to kind of get to know what the MV star, MVC, MVVM, MVP stuff means. And there's different views on this. There's different opinions on what MVC means and what MVVM means. There's been wars, religious wars fought and lost over what MV star and MVC mean. And I'm not going to start one of those wars today. I'm going to give you my opinion. If you disagree with me, that's cool. I'm okay with that. But we're going to base it off of my opinion because I'm up here and you're not. So we're going to talk about what it means to be MV star, what it means to be MVC. So here we're looking at what's typically a good example of MVC. The user actions come into the view. The view itself fires as a result of that, calls into the controller and tells the controller, hey, something just happened, make something else happen. The controller does some work manipulating the model. The model changes, and then the model fires an event that the view is subscribed to. In response to that event being captured by the view will update itself. So that last piece is a pretty critical piece of this discussion. The view updates itself in response to events from the model. Well, the nice thing here is that the view doesn't directly manipulate the model. A lot of times when you're writing those jQuery heavy applications, you have a view, you have a model, conceptually anyway, and the view is directly updating the model, and the model is directly updating the view, and that's just how it works. Here we've decoupled the view from the model. The view doesn't know about the model at all, and the view only knows about, as far as updating it, that is, and the view only is aware of model changes by way of events that are fired that it's subscribed to. And that's it. The view has no other idea, but because the view is responsible for updating itself, the view has a little bit of logic in it. This is kind of a good thing and a bad thing. It kind of depends on your point of view. If you're the kind of person who understands JavaScript, feels comfortable working with these views, feels comfortable manipulating the DOM, even if you're using some other template or library to help you with that, this is perfect for you. On the other hand, because the view is a little logic heavy, it might not be a good fit in the scenarios where your designing your view is an HTML fiend but has very little or no comfortable feeling with JavaScript. So they're going to have to write some JavaScript. You're going to make those angle bracket folks unhappy. So that's MVC. MVP is a twist on MVC. In fact, all of these are really just twists on the core MVC concept. MVP takes a different approach with a presenter. A presenter is a type of controller, but it's a controller that does a little bit more work. What happens here is the view will call into the presenter, just like it did with the controller in MVC. The presenter will manipulate the model, just like it would, the controller would do in MVC. The model fires an event, just like it would in MVC. However, the difference is the model fires the event that a presenter is subscribed to, not the view. This completely decouples the view from the model. And the presenter is the only one who knows about the model. This allows the view to be slimmer in terms of logic, possibly even completely bare of logic. However, it probably knows at least has just enough logic, depending on the implementation, where the presenter has something to update on the view. But logic-wise, the view is much thinner now. It might be more appealing to the type of front-end developer who is comfortable with JavaScript but not terribly comfortable with it. But again, the presenter directly updates the view. Well, then there's MVVM, which is an intriguing one. What MVVM does is it takes calls all the way down and events all the way back up. So the user applies some actions in the view, clicks a button, whatever, and a view event, a UI event gets triggered, which results in a call into the view model. Now, the view model is another type of controller, but it's really quite different in the sense that a view model has some controller logic in it, but it also has some model logic in it. And the difference between a view model and a regular model is that a view model is the model for the view. It contains perhaps some of the elements, some of the data that the model itself contains, but it also may contain some elements that are only pertaining to the view. Likewise, the view model, even though it carries some of the same data that the model carries with it, it carries it in a way that the view is ready to receive it. If there's any sort of data formatting that needs to be done between the model and the view, it's going to happen in the view model. The view model will carry the formatted version of whatever the model deals with, as an example of how that might work. Regardless, the calls go into the view model, much like it would to a controller. The view model will manipulate the model. That's where it's doing its controller work. Meanwhile, the model fires an event that the view model is responsible for, and then the view model, in response to that, fires its own event that the view responds to. and then the view is responsible for being updated. And depending on, there's some implementations of this where the view is actually very, very thin. I'll show you one of those here in a bit, in which case these are perfect for the situation where you have a UI developer, a front-end developer who is very uncomfortable with JavaScript, leaving the smart guys, you guys in the room, to write all the JavaScript stuff down at the bottom. But we do have to touch on the client template libraries. This is really not a talk on that, but I have to touch on it because it's going to come up. We're going to see these. And again, much like the MV frameworks or the client-side UI frameworks, there's lots of choices, and they're all great choices. There's actually some that are quite similar to each other, shockingly similar. For example, Mustache, Handlebars, Hogan. These are very heavy in the curly brace category of templating. You put these little curly braces on there, which someone at some point decided looks like a mustache, and so that's where the mustache name, the handlebars, and then Hogan, I guess, the original logo I saw for Hogan looked like Hulk Hogan with his mustache. So that's where they get that from. Then there's some that are very angle bracket heavy, and what I mean by angle bracket, I mean they're just using good old HTML tags with some additional properties or additional attributes on there to help guide the production of the view. A good example of those, there's not really one that's on the list there, but a good example of those is when we look at Knockout. You're going to see Knockout's view templates are just HTML with a handful of special attributes on them. Then there's some that are very scriptlet heavy. If you're familiar with using JSPs and you're writing it without tags but using scriptlets, there's some that are a lot like that. A couple of examples of those are, I think Jade is like that, I believe underscore templates like that if I remember right. I know that EJS and ECO are very scriptlet heavy. That's embedded JavaScript, embedded CoffeeScript templates. Those are also very scriptlet heavy, where you're actually writing JavaScript in little scriptlet blocks within your view. And then there's some that have no view at all. They're not even an HTML template at all. There's no tags whatsoever. Jade is an example of a templating engine, a templating framework where what you're doing is you're using a DSL and you're writing this little structured DSL that kind of looks structurally like HTML, but there's not an angle bracket anywhere in it. And ultimately it produces the HTML view. Again, it comes down to choice, which one you feel most comfortable with. Sometimes a framework encourages you to use a specific templating library. Most of them are flexible enough to let you choose a different one if you want to. It just comes down to what you feel comfortable with. Most of us as Java developers, having worked with JSP, feel uncomfortable with scriptlets, I would imagine. That said, I've used EJS and ECO, and it felt weird at first, but I got over it. You get more power that way. You just get less clarity in your template. Well, I showed you the short list, and we don't have time to talk about all of those on the short list. So I'm going to give you a shorter list. We're going to consider Backbone, Spine, Knockout, Knockback, and Sammy today. And what really pains me about telling you that is that in preparation for this talk, I left a lot of frameworks on the cutting room floor. I just did not have opportunity, time to prepare for some of those. I didn't have time to, certainly in the time we have here today, to tell you about all of those. We just simply don't have the time for those. So I picked on a handful of the ones that I'm most familiar with and most comfortable talking about today, and the ones that I had time to prepare for, and these are the ones we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about them in the context of to-do MVC. I started to bake up my own examples for this talk, and it occurred to me really quickly that that was going to be a huge time killer on my part. And why would I need to recreate that when there's already an excellent set of examples out on the web in GitHub that compares not only these frameworks but several of the other frameworks, showing essentially the same problem, a to-do list, and showing it over and over again, implemented in different frameworks or different, even in some cases, the same framework but different approaches with that framework. So we're going to look at a few of those. Plus I have a few other examples just from my own experience playing around that I might pull up and show you just to give you a feel for how some of these things work. Let's start with Backbone. Who here knows Backbone? All right, good number of you. Backbone is pretty good. I like it a lot. I really do. The biggest hassle I have with Backbone is the getting started story. It's wonderful, but it's really just more of it's hardly even a framework. In fact, I know some people who would definitely say it's not a framework. I myself am almost in that camp. It's really just a bunch of almost disjointed bits of functionality. You have stuff for supporting model creation. You have stuff for supporting routing. You have stuff for dealing with the view. But really, you could use any one of these things individually without the others. It's when you pull them together you get the feel of a framework. And that's a good thing in that it's somewhat disjointed. It's a bad thing in the sense that I'm left wondering as a newbie when I first started looking at Backbone, how do I get started? Where do I go to first? And it always hurt me painfully to go and Google for this. Of course, as I mentioned yesterday, finding Backbone and other framework information online, you're going to find more about chiropractic care than you're going to find about JavaScript frameworks. But once you did find a good tutorial on Backbone, almost every single Backbone tutorial out there takes the approach of, let's show you how to do a model. And I'm like, no, this is a web app. I don't really care about models yet. I'm going to start up front. Well, let me show you how to do a model. Now let me show you how to do this. And let me show you how to do it. And it just sort of piecemealed it. And it hurt me at first because I thought that was a horrible way of learning. I wanted to see the whole picture and then dive down into each one. I realized in hindsight that was actually a good thing, and I encourage no one to snub those at all. Instead, if you see an article like that, please follow that tutorial and approach it from the model first and then work your way out. It's a much better way from my experience in learning it. It is one of the most used client-side UI frameworks. There are a ton of sites out there that use it. I am not going to tell you what they are. I'll leave it up to you to go search and figure that out, but there are a ton of them, and most of the people who are using it are quite proud of it, and you'll find that kind of information on the Backbone website. In fact, there's a huge list of sites that are, in fact, using Backbone. It does have a large community and set of extensions. This is by far, the big dog out there when it comes to JavaScript frameworks. Like most of these frameworks, it is MIT licensed, which is a very friendly license. It pretty much, because of its JavaScript nature, almost has to be, I suppose. But it's 5.6 minified and gzipped, 4 kilobytes for the underscore dependency. So altogether, we're looking at just almost 10K of dependency minified and gzipped, which isn't huge. I only mention this because it's an important factor to keep in mind when you're pushing JavaScript code down to a client, especially if it's a mobile client. You want to keep those as small as possible. By the way, that size does not include any dependencies other than underscore or any other extensions you may choose. As soon as you start piling that stuff on, naturally it's going to get larger. Now, Backbone's key components are the models. Again, these define a single instance of whatever some domain concept is, an employee, a session, an order, a product, what have you. It's a single instance of those. There's a collection which conceptually in the MVC world is part of the model. It defines a collection of models. And for whatever reason, Backbone has broken out a collection of models from models themselves as two different concepts. And you have to define those individually. Collectively, though, models and collections are the model. You have views. These define how the UI interacts with the client. How the user interacts with the client. How the front end, the view itself, interacts with the underlying code, and how it interacts with the model and collection. Routers, basically routers are not really part of MVC proper. Conceptually, you might think of them as being part of the controller, although they're really sort of above that in some ways. They define how navigation works. And the nice thing about a good router is in your browser, it allows you to still navigate on a single page, staying on the same page, never leaving the page, but still have a certain amount of history and the ability to bookmark URLs and the ability to navigate back and forth with those URLs because it just changes the URL in the fragment parameter. So a good router will do that kind of thing. And so Backbone brings all those things together. Now, in my analysis of this, the model, it is, again, the models and the collections brought together defines what the model is. It's pretty clear what it offers, what it brings to the table MVC-wise. It is the M. It's very clear that that's the case. And it provides certain features that you would expect to have, like some sort of persistence, either AJAX over over the wire to some REST API, perhaps local storage. There's an extension that supports that. There's also possibly other extensions out there that support other types of persistence. I don't mention it here, but the model probably you're going to need some form of validation. There's validation support in it. There's other types of things that you would want to get with the model. So that's a good thing. The view, well, technically, it's not the view. It's what Backbone calls the view and what I call the view are slightly different than each other, but my mind shifts on this daily, so that it may not even be in line with what this slide says. Essentially, from the Backbone's point of view, I think of the view as both the view itself, the view class that you create in Backbone, as well as the templates that you're going to produce using handlebars or mustache or what have you. Those together constitute the view to a great degree. There is no controller, at least not in the classical sense. Backbone doesn't directly define a controller. They used to. In older versions of Backbone, they had a thing called a controller, and they renamed it to view because it technically wasn't a controller in the strict sense of the term controller. Although, to a great degree, when you take the routers and views together, it kind of feels like a controller, especially when you're familiar with like Spring MVC. It gives you that same sort of feel of a controller. The routers deal with the request mapping pieces. The views deal with actually processing that. Controller-like. More often than not, I see a lot of Backbone code that is using the view as more of a presenter model, where the presenter is going to fire back into it's going to listen to events from the model and then fire back into the view to update that. But that said, Backbone doesn't really require that. It doesn't mandate that. Again, it's a bunch of really good, but mostly disjointed pieces of a framework. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a really good thing in some ways. As far as categorizing it, it's really not MVC, MVP, or MVVM. I would categorize it as MV star, or if you really pushed me, I would call it MVP, but even then, MVP is only because that's how I see it mostly implemented. It's not necessarily because the framework itself enforces that. Now, what does MV star mean? I didn't touch on that yet. MV star means it's model, view, and something else. And something else is up to someone else to tell you what that is. So this is how I feel the Backbone falls into place. Now let me show you a little quick example of this. I'm going to go with, let me find out there it is. I'm pulling up the To-Do MVC app. I may or may not actually run it depending on timing, but we'll pull up the Backbone example. And you see in the Backbone example, and in this case, they're not using any form of modularity or anything. They're actually loading up all the scripts in this big, ugly script block here. So, but the HTML is itself fairly thin. When you go into the JavaScript, you're going to see this app. This is essentially just a bootstrap. It kind of kicks off the application, and it goes to this app view. The app view itself, again, it's quite a bit of JavaScript here, and it is, as you can see, it's using a little bit of jQuery. You'll see stripped laid around in there. What we have here, though, is we have a view, and here we have another view, the to-dos view, and in both cases they extend Backbone view. So let me dive in on that a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. The to-do view extends Backbone view by calling Backbone view.extend. That's kind of a common pattern for extending JavaScript objects, in case you're unfamiliar with it. They have a handful of things in there. One is it defines a set of events. Anytime a click happens on the whatever it is that has the class of toggle, anytime somebody clicks on that, it's going to call a method called toggle completed. Double click on label, it's going to basically go call some method called edit. Now the thing here is, notice the method name is expressed as a string, which feels a little weird to me. I would almost rather actually reference a method itself directly. There's some good and bad things about this. It's kind of nice that I don't have to even know what the signature is. I don't have to deal with collecting the event itself and passing it into there, because if I call that method directly, I'm going to have to know what that event is. I'm going to have to be able to pass it into that method to make it happen, or any other data I want to collect. Here, I just say toggle completed. Backbone deals with pulling all the stuff that needs to be passed into that event handler to be dealt with. On the other hand, in the cases where I just don't need the event at all in the course of event handling, that's kind of inconvenient and weird, and having it as a string feels unusual to me. But that said, I'll show you a way around that in a bit. There's a few other things going on here. We have a render function. Ultimately, the goal of this is it renders some HTML, in this case pulled from a template. It's going to render some HTML to a thing called an EL. This is in most of these JavaScript frameworks, at least in Backbone and Spine, they have this thing called the EL. This is the element on the HTML page that this controller or this view is responsible for manipulating. And it can be overridden, but typically you say, hey, here's your EL. Anytime you need to write something to the view, you write it to this particular DOM element. And that's all it's doing there, is writing it out. But it is responsible for actually updating the view directly, as you can see here. Let's see, I was looking for, oh, here we go. Here's those event handlers. Just toggle visible, is hidden. And in all these cases, as you're seeing with certainly toggle visible and toggle completed, it's an event handler. The event could be passed in there, but we're not using the event, so it's unnecessary. It would be awful nice if I could just reference it directly where I define the events, but I can't. It's just not possible in Backbone as it stands now. Let's talk about the models. Here's the to-do model. Very simple. It extends Backbone's model class. Has a few defaults as far as what the different properties are on this. We have a title property and completed property. And we have a save where we can essentially what we're going to do is save it. I'm sorry, we have a toggle. I'm sorry. We have a toggle where we're going to toggle the state of this, and we're going to change it from completed to not completed. But when we do that, we're going to save that. Other than that, the model's fairly thin. That doesn't mean it doesn't do anything. The good news is I didn't have to write the persistence code. I did not have to write any validation code, although I could have declared some here. I didn't, or the guys who wrote this didn't. Most of that stuff comes baked into the model class that you're extending, and that's why you extend the model class instead of writing your own JavaScript model object. Because if you wrote your own, you're going to have to go write that validation code, that persistence code yourself. The models are usually fairly simple and straightforward. Also notice it's using a standard JavaScript form of a module here by wrapping it in a function. That's pretty common if you're not using something like CommonJS or AMD for modularity. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. And then finally, I want to show you the routers, because the routers are kind of where all this kind of happens. When you navigate, it's going to change the URL. It's going to change it to have a pound and some path at the end of it. This is not a server path. This is not going to go back to the server side and execute any code there. It's going to all happen in the client, and it's whatever happens after that hash that decides where we're going to go. So here we have one that says anything that ends in filter is going to call set filter. So, and also we do have the ability to support history, so we kick that in. And let me just show you how it runs. It's not terribly exciting, but it's worth showing it anyway. Let's see, architecture examples. Actually, I'm in the wrong directory. There we go. Architecture examples, Backbone, and it helps if I put a CD on it. This is where you get to watch me fumble a little bit with typing. And let's open index.html in my browser and pull my browser up where you can see it. And here's the to-do list. Now, it's kind of hard to see because I'm pulling this from the file system, but here I'm just looking at index.html. Got a really long file-based URL, but it's still going to work. There's no actual server-side element to this at this point. It's not implemented. But we have a list of stuff. I can say other things, present JavaScript stuff, present Spring Social, and I'm going to go ahead, since I'm already in the course of doing this, I'll check this when it's done, and I did that on the flight here, and you get the idea. And if you come over here and look, that hasn't changed because I really haven't done a whole lot of navigation yet, but if I go look at active, now it's showing me just active stuff. Now my URL has changed slightly by putting the active route on it. And what's nice about that is I can also do completed, and I get to the completed. I didn't have to click on it. Now the reason I typed it is I'm probably not going to do that in the real world, but it demonstrates the fact that I could have bookmarked this. And it's going to go to that state of the application that means completed, show me the completed tasks. It's still the same client-side code, but it's not necessarily hitting the server to do that. Okay, I can clear the completeds out. They're all gone. We can go back to all, and here's what we have going on. I'll attend to some of those other things later on. Any questions on Backbone? I'm about to wrap it up on that and move on. Okay, fantastic. Okay. Again, my basic tips for working with Backbone are do this. Learn the models, learn the collections, learn the views, then learn how routers work. You don't have to use any one of these in conjunction with all of them. You get to pick and choose with Backbone which you want to use. Together they are a really strong framework, but individually they also offer some really great features as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that as I work through some of the other frameworks. It is easy to get lost if you try to learn as a full framework. Speaking from my experience, but eat the elephant one bite at a time is my advice. And I strongly recommend considering scaffolding and other opinionated extensions. Backbone, as I said, doesn't have a clear getting started story. It's the thing that frustrated me the most about Backbone is every time I looked at a Backbone example and tried to learn from it, everyone was completely different than the last one because everybody did it differently. So there are some scaffolding options that will basically give you a Backbone project. It may be different than someone else's, but at least you have something to start with. You have an app you can get started with. You also have some opinionated extensions such as Thorax, which is one I'm familiar with, such as Chaplin or Marionette. These will help you kind of force you down a certain path of using Backbone. It's still based on Backbone. It's forcing you down a certain programming model with Backbone. First off, to help you with the getting started story, because there's a clear picture of how things are supposed to work. And number two, by following their opinion, you get a few extra benefits out of it. And also, by all means, modularize. I didn't show you the modular version of this example, but consider modularizing. Look at AMD, look at Common.js, look at Require.js, look at some of the Wire.js, look at some of the other options. Consider modularizing. Don't have a script tag soup in your HTML file. Okay. That said, before I move on to the next framework, I just want to give you a quick taste of something. Very quick taste. I said that I recommended using a opinionated framework, recommend using a scaffolding. I'm just going to show you an example of one of those, and that's Thorax. I have no real strong ties to Thorax other than I think it's cool. So you type Thorax, you hit enter, and what you're getting is a set of commands you can issue. If you're familiar with working with Grails or Rails or Spring Roo, this feels kind of familiar. This is the same kind of thing you might do with those guys. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a Thorax. What am I looking for here? This is a bad day for me to have a brain meltdown. Okay. Create project name, my app. There we go. It's going to go off and do some stuff. Now here's the gotcha about this. It feels like it's actually going off and generating code. The reason that it's so slow, for one thing, is it's not actually generating code. It's a lie. It's actually going and checking out a basic template project out of GitHub for you. And that's all it's doing. And then it runs npm and pulls down all the different dependencies you may have for you. But it's really just pulling something out of GitHub. It's important that you know that. Because if you're writing code where you don't have network access, such as that you're at a conference where the network is poor, or if you're on an airplane or what have you, Thorax is not going to work very well for you, and I apologize for that. At least for the creating a project part of it. After that, it's not bad. So we're going to go into my app, and what we got here is a whole bunch of stuff that we got for free. And we won't go over this in any great detail, but what we do get is, among other things, we get a lumbar build, which if you missed my talk about lumbar yesterday, essentially what it does is it takes a whole collection of stuff, targets various platforms, pulling a big collection of source code that hits all platforms, and also focusing on individual pieces of source code that might target only iPhone or iPad or traditional web browser, and helps you avoid code duplication across these platforms as much as possible. Then we have these, within the JavaScript path, we have your JavaScript code. I'm not going to dig down into this, but if you start digging in there, you realize really quick, this is just Backbone, but it's a special extension of Backbone. You don't extend Backbone views. What you extend is in this case, an application view, but application view itself is extending the Thorax view. So you're getting some extra benefits of working with Thorax that you would not get with just core based backbone. One example of that, and the only reason I even go this far into it, is the routers. They allow you to do, well, where's my router setup? Actually, I'm looking in the wrong place. I need, is it this one? Well, I'm not going to dig for it. It's in there somewhere, and I just forgot where I put it. What you end up having when you set up your routes, you have the opportunity of not just specifying this route goes to this method name by string. If you want to, you can inline a function. You can call another function. The thing I complained about with Backbone, Thorax fixes that. And Thorax also brings about 6 or 7 other things to the table, some additional model view binding capabilities and some other stuff. But here, the getting started story is quite clear. I ran Thorax, create project. I have a project now. I start building on top of it. All right. How about Spine? Anybody here use Spine? Once again, if you start Googling for this, you're going to find a lot about your local chiropractor. Same with Thorax, same with lumbar. I don't know what was going on when they came up with these names, but Spine is not based on Backbone, despite its name. It is inspired by Backbone. Thorax actually builds on top of Backbone. Spine, on the other hand, takes some of Backbone's concepts, some of its ideas, says, yes, those are good, but let me give you a different twist on it. It's opinionated, much like Thorax, but it's flexible. It's still very flexible. It's not overly opinionated. It is developed in CoffeeScript, but if you're afraid of CoffeeScript, you can use it with either CoffeeScript or JavaScript. In fact, one of the coolest features of Spine is its documentation, because you go to their website, they show you examples in CoffeeScript. They're always next to each one of those examples is a little button you can click, and when you click it, it flips over and shows you the equivalent JavaScript code for it. They will tell you the path of least resistance is to use CoffeeScript, but you're welcome to use JavaScript all you want. The one thing I can say about the CoffeeScript versus JavaScript debate is I appreciate the folks who enjoy using JavaScript and the functional approach to JavaScript. The one thing I can agree with CoffeeScript is, as much as I like the functional approach, when I'm writing a controller, it's going to be an object. I'm not thinking very functionally at that level. So it's kind of nice to take advantage of a language that thinks in objects as opposed to thinks functionally when I actually need to deal with objects. You get to mix and match if you want, but it's up to you. I only mention that because a lot of people are scared of CoffeeScript or just flat out hate CoffeeScript. You're not required to use it. It is the path of least resistance, though. It has a much smaller community than Backbone and far fewer extensions, although there are a handful out there. The main thing that I liked about Spine is Spine gave me that same getting started story that I got with Thorax. There's a tool called spine.app. You run spine.app and it will give you a project, much like Thorax gave me a project. The other thing I liked about spine.app is it gave me a fairly clear path to developing a mobile application. With Backbone, you can develop mobile applications. There's lots of great mobile apps, probably some that we're all using that are developed using Backbone. But Backbone itself does not lend itself to developing mobile apps. You have other frameworks and other extensions have built on top of that to do that, using jQuery Mobile, using some custom stuff, using JQ-Touch, whatever. Well, Spine brings a certain amount of mobile support to, or Spine Mobile brings a certain amount of mobile support to Spine. And it does so not so much in styling buttons to look like they belong on an iPhone. It does it in so much in dealing with transitions. When you go from one screen to another, does the screen instantly switch, or does it slide over really nice like people kind of expect on a mobile app? It also deals with some of the intricacies of event handling, specifically the 300 millisecond delay that is taken when on a mobile device, specifically Safari on iOS I know does this, from the time your finger touches the screen to the time that something actually happens, while it tries to figure out whether or not you're going to swipe or just click something. If you try to handle a click event on a mobile device, things don't behave quite the way you expect because of the timing of that. So Spine Mobile brings the notion of a new kind of event called a tap event. And if you're developing for a mobile device, they encourage you to use a tap event instead of a click event because that'll be more natural as far as how it behaves. Again, it's MIT licensed. In fact, all of these I'm going to show you are. I just mentioned that in case anyone asks. The core framework is 4K. If you wanted to get the entire framework, including all the modules, and most of them are optional, but eventually you may end up using all of them. If you pull them all in, you're looking at 10K. That does not include Spine Mobile, which adds another 2.6K to the mix. So it's fairly lightweight in what it does. It does not depend on underscore. It does not depend on jQuery directly, although it does depend on the jQuery API, which means if you don't, for whatever reason, don't want to use jQuery, you can use something lighter weight like Zepto if that's what you want to use. And there's the website for it. The models, very much the same as what we saw with Backbone. The difference is in Spine, there is no differentiation between a single instance of a model object and a collection of model objects. It's the same thing. You implement them, you extend the model class, and you get the equivalent of what Backbone offered in both collections and models. The views, what they call view is a little different than what Backbone calls view. Backbone called that class a view. They call a view essentially a template. It's typically an embedded CoffeeScript template, although I've seen other templating frameworks used, but it's typically the template itself, which from a Spring developer's point of view, that kind of feels natural because we often call the JSP a view, and the controller the thing that renders or transitions to that view. And then they have a thing called a controller, which is similar in style to what Backbone has with a view, but it's actually truly encompasses what a controller should do. It truly is the glue between the view and the model. It actually fits the MVC model much more directly than what Backbone does. And it also, the controllers themselves have the routing capability baked into them, so there's not a separate notion of a router like there was with Backbone. So it's clear from this point of view that we're looking at, this is an MVC framework. Very, very much the same. And the Spine model supports validation, AJAX, and/or local storage, persistence. In fact, it's shockingly simple how easy it is to make it persist to local storage or AJAX just by changing one line of code. Spine encourages the use of ECO templates, but you don't have to use them. And Spine Mobile takes a slightly different approach to the standard Spine model in that it declares a panel and a stage, the stage being kind of the background for your app, and a panel, the stage is always there, and then the panel is sort of rendered on top of that. And you have many panels within an application, and those are essentially the pages or screens that keep flipping in and out as the user navigates around your application. It's clear that it would be categorized as an MVC application. I could show you the to-do list demo in Spine, but in the interest of time and the fact that I want to cover some more of these items, I'm not going to show you that. Instead, what I'm going to show you is another example that I wrote here a few months ago and give you a feel for what that's like. Let me find my window. So I was presenting this on at another conference, and I created this app called NFJS Books. And if you go look at the code here, we have all sorts of stuff in place, but the main thing is we have controllers. And it's a Books controller extends Spine controller. Now this is CoffeeScript. This isn't JavaScript. It could have been written in JavaScript, but I just didn't. So the Books controller extends the Spine controller. Notice we have some events dealt with there. It looks very much like the kind of events that we saw with Backbone. We have our EL defined as being some element on the page whose ID is name. That's the things that this is going to ultimately render into. And then I'm using common.js down here to bring in my templates, or I'm sorry, to bring in the views that I need to use, my templates. So if someone were to navigate to the list route, then I'm going to do an HTML. The HTML is a function that actually renders out to the DOM, to the EL, and I'm going to render whatever is brought in by doing a common.js require on views/books/list. Notice there's no extension on that. And the reason there's no extension on that is because although my view is implemented in embedded CoffeeScript and has an ECO extension on it, that ultimately gets compiled into JavaScript. And it's referenced with this name of views, books, list, and there's no notion of how it was actually implemented in the first place. I'm passing in another little object here as a model that's going to be rendered into that list. And likewise with the form, I'm just going to display it, but there is no model I'm passing in. And there's other methods in here. The one thing that's kind of critical when you're working with Spine, if you're using the CoffeeScript form, is if you're dealing with events, be sure that the event handling methods have the fat arrow on them. Otherwise, you lose the context is slightly different. That's an important detail. If you have the single arrow, it's it's fine for your general method definition, but for for event handling method, you're going to want to have the fat arrow so that the context and scope of what you're working with is set right. We have models, extremely uninteresting in comparison to the controller. But here I've essentially said I've got a book. It's a model whose name is book, and the model has a title, a title, an author, and a type. And those are the three fields that I'm going to care about. Now the reason you have to declare those, I mean JavaScript, CoffeeScript, both of them are very dynamic. You can have whatever properties, whatever attributes you want on an object. That's true, but here we're saying these are the ones we care about when it comes time to persist things. I extend spine model local, which basically means what I'm doing here is anytime I call save on this, I'm going to write it to local storage. I could optionally extend spine model Ajax, which means it's going to make an Ajax call out. And then I have a validation method. What's going to happen is every time I call save, that method's going to get called. If that method returns anything at all, validation fails. Anything truthy, validation will fail. In this case, if the title and author are specified, it's not going to return anything. But if the title and author, either one of those is missing, I'm going to return this string. Now this serves two purposes. Number one is it triggers a failed validation. Number two, it gives me a convenient place to go to get what method, what text I want to show to the user when it comes time to tell them that they need to fix this. Now in both cases I didn't show it on the controller, but in both the model and the controller what we're looking at here is at the top we're using CommonJS to pull in the spine module so we can work with it. Conceptually from a Java developer's point of view, think of that as an import. And then at the bottom we have a module exports. We're basically saying this class we're going to export so that other things such as the controllers can require those. Okay. Now the thing about CommonJS versus AMD, I'll touch on it briefly now and mention it later. CommonJS is commonly thought of as being used on the server side for modularization, and AMD is a better approach for the client side, and certainly this is client-side code. The thing is that these modules are actually resolved during a compilation step. Therefore, it's not really server-side, but it's not client-side either, so CommonJS seemed to be a good approach that they took here as opposed to AMD, which would have handled that at runtime. And that said, I'll show you very quickly what the views look like, and we'll move on. Here's the view. It's using embedded CoffeeScript, which as you can see is scriptlet oriented, using JavaScript scripts within some little scriptlet tags. It looks a lot like JSP, except that's not Java in those blocks, that's JavaScript. Other than that, if you're familiar with using scriptlet code in JSP, you'll be familiar with this just fine. All right. Now, I would like to show you that running, but instead, I want to show you something else. I'm going to show you the mobile version of this, just to give you a feel for what Spine Mobile brings to the table. Now, one of the things when you're working with Spine, you are going to need to go through a build process to build your code, much like Lumbar did the same thing for Thorax. And the tool you're going to use to build it is called hem. You type hem build, and you wait a moment, and if it's happy, it will tell you it's happy. It built the application. And if I want to, I can also do a hem watch, and what that's going to do is do a constant watch on the directory. Lumbar had the same feature. It's going to watch that directory, and if you make any changes, it'll automatically do a build for you. But instead of doing that, because that'll get really boring really fast, I'm going to run the server. And this starts up a little test server running on port 9294, and I can go to that using my phone. And this book, or this little example is actually got a couple of bugs in it, so it doesn't fully work, but it works enough to show you what I wanted to show you here. Spine Mobile styled this for me. Spine Mobile gave me a header, it gave me a content block, it gave me a place at the bottom if I want to put buttons at the bottom. I don't have any buttons at the bottom, and I could style it such that it doesn't show that, but I was lazy and didn't change that. Now the blue, the white, and the black, those are part of the stage. Those are things that are in the background. The title at the top and the button next to it, those are part of the panel that's currently being displayed. The War and Peace, that list you see there, which is quite ugly at the moment, that list is also part of the panel that's being displayed. It's just displaying it on top of the content portion of the stage, and there are no buttons on the button bar at the bottom. When I click on New Book, we're going to see a transition. Now, it didn't happen very pretty because my emulator popped up the keyboard for some reason. But you notice it slid back and forth. It's not just a page flipping thing. That's one of the other things that Spine Mobile brings to the table, is the ability to do this transition smoothly. Out of the box, it only offers left and right and then no, or just quick transitions. I've actually got a pull request that I haven't given to them yet, but it's ready to go as soon as I test it a little bit more, to give them more up and down, so you can slide up a panel and then slide back down if you want. I just haven't finished testing that because it's been busy. In theory, I should be able to add stuff here just like you could with any other application, but that's the bug that's not working, is this button, for whatever reason, isn't wired to something. So, but it still demonstrates enough to show you the fact that this is what Spine Mobile brings to the table. Primarily some transitions, a little bit of layout, and what I couldn't demonstrate adequately is the 300 millisecond delay handling. All right, moving right along. If you're using Spine, again, definitely it's great for using the spine.app tool to generate the code for you. The one thing you got to keep in mind is that although Spine does not require you to use CoffeeScript, the code that spine.app spits out will be CoffeeScript. You're welcome to go change it and convert it to JavaScript. It'll be happy with that, but it's going to give you CoffeeScript out of the box. It has a good project structure, though. I kind of like its project structure, and it's not dramatically different from what Lumbar or Thorax gives you for the Thorax kind of project. You don't have to like CoffeeScript. Embrace it or don't. Like I said, I embrace it for things where I'm already working in an object-oriented mindset anyway. I definitely, if I'm doing event handling and other stuff like that, I start feeling a little bit more inclined to start writing some functional code. And you're welcome to mix and match however you see fit. Using him, as I showed you, you can build the project, and when you do the build, all the CoffeeScript and JavaScript that's in your project get compiled, and the templates for that matter get compiled into a single application.js. All the stylus and CSS gets compiled into a single application.css and are placed in a public directory. So even though I ran the hem server to test this, that's probably not what you want to run in production. All you need to do is do that build, pick up the contents of the public directory, and toss it out to whatever server you want to serve this from, and you're set. How about Knockout? Anybody here use Knockout? A little surprised. I expected a few more hands on that. Well, Knockout's a really neat tool. When I first approached Knockout, I thought, well, I thought it was insanely hard, and I think that was probably tainted by having talked to somebody who told me it was insanely hard. And I guess because of that, I psychologically could not deal with it. And then I came back a month or so later, and actually it's one of my favorite ones now. It's really strong at dynamic model to view binding. The idea that if something in the model changes, the view just changes with it, and you don't have to write code to do that. It's magic. And also the other way around. If something in the view changes, maybe somebody types something into a field, the model that's bound to that will already be changed. There's no code you have to do, no events that you explicitly have to fire to make that happen. It has a very well-established community, although it's unclear about the size of it. I do hear a lot of folks who do use it, and that's why I'm a little surprised I didn't see too many hands go up when I asked. It is MIT licensed, and it's 14.3 kilobytes, which is not very slim compared to some of the other frameworks out there. It's shockingly big, and that's not with any extensions. That's the core Knockout library, and it's gzipped and minified, so it's quite large, despite the fact that their website says it's lightweight. I find it difficult to agree with that. I'm not saying it's monstrous, but come on, in comparison, it is a little big. Maybe that matters to you, maybe it doesn't. Whatever. I mean, you can call it lightweight if you want. I know. Whatever. And there's the website for it. Knockout has these basic key concepts. They have a view, which really is just a template. It's really just HTML, honestly. It's HTML with some special attributes in it. And then the view models. These are the things I spoke of. This is an MVVM framework. It's the view model. It's the model that represents the view. It's the model that contains the data in a way that's appropriate for the view. And Knockout doesn't have a support for a model. In fact, if you start looking at some of the examples out there for Knockout, you'll see quickly that a lot of people are just writing plain, ordinary JavaScript objects and calling that the model. And that's fine. That's a fine choice, except you miss out on some of those other benefits that a framework like Backbone or Spine give you, where you have validation, you have AJAX persistence, you have local storage persistence and things like that. You're lacking those model features that a framework like Backbone and Spine would bring to the table. Now the view is the HTML and the body of an element. It's just HTML. It just has some special attributes for data binding purposes. The event binding is declarative, but it's conceptually part of the view. Model view, it's everything I've already told you it is. So definitely I would categorize this as an MVC or MVVM framework. And just to give you a real quick feature look at that, let's pull up the right editor. And there we go. Let's go look at, that's not it either. There we go. Let's go look at Knockout. Knockout has, as its template, we just have a plain HTML file. It's pulling in some stuff here, but we have, if you start looking at the elements here, we have a UL that has an ID of to-do list, but it has a data bind, and the value of the data bind attribute has some scriptlet-like code in it to help essentially iterate over a list. Within deeper down, we're going to have some more data bind to say checked completion. So this is essentially, we're going to set the checked value of this checkbox. We're going to set it to true if whatever the current item is in this iteration has a completed value of true. We have the text, which is the title. We have you see all these other items that are handled here, but you notice there is no scriptlet code technically. It's just attributes with scriptlet-like code embedded inside of the attributes. The nice thing about this is just HTML. You can pull this up in a regular web browser without even having the JavaScript piece behind it, and it's going to still look somewhat correct. You're not going to have any JavaScript that's going to break in it. There's really very little JavaScript directly in this page. And that's a nice thing. It's also good for when you have your front-end developers who aren't very JavaScript savvy. They might understand a little bit of this code. This would be a great opportunity to take advantage of Knockout's form of views to let them design this in whatever designer tool they feel comfortable with without having to worry themselves too much with JavaScript. And then you look a little bit deeper in here, there's not a whole lot to talk about. We have app.js, which has defined in it a, well, first off, let me just get out of the way. We have a lib, which brings in Knockout itself, so ignore that. This is the application code. And it's kind of big. It's not huge, but it's kind of big. But in there, we're going to find things like various event handling stuff here, a few more like select and focus handlers. We have a to-do. This is our model right here. This is our model object. And if you look really closely at that, you'll see it's really just a JavaScript object. There's no model functionality per se. Again, this is not something that Knockout excels at. But we do have the view model down here. The view model itself is also a JavaScript object. It has some other stuff that you will use via the Knockout object, but the view model itself is just a JavaScript object. It's good and bad again. It's lightweight in the sense that you're not tying this particular object to any particular framework except through the KO object. But you miss out, at least in the model, you miss out on some of the features you might get with a full-blown model class that you might extend. Okay? Well, unless your needs are very simple. If you're doing something as simple as maybe showing a shopping cart and you have the items on the screen, and anytime somebody updates the amount, the number of items they want to purchase, and therefore you want to display a more updated price without forcing them to click a button, if that's all you want to do, something of that level, Knockout's great. Because Knockout is great at taking stuff on the view, such as maybe somebody changing the number of a particular item that they want to purchase, and updating the model behind the scenes, allowing that model to do some calculations, and then in return update the view automatically. Does a great job of that. But at some point you're missing out. You're missing out on the ability to do any good routing. You're missing out on a proper model class. And so Knockout is not intended to be a full-blown framework in that sense. It is MVVM, but I'm even hesitant to call it that because the model is missing. It's more of a star VVM, and even then maybe the view is a little slim, but I'll give it the view. Star VVM is more or less what I would call it. You want to rely on some other frameworks to help you with things like routing and to help you with the model. That said, They have an awesome tutorial. If you've never worked through it, I highly recommend it. It's great fun. It takes about an hour and a half to go through all the modules in the tutorial, and at the end you'll feel really confident and you'll be in love with Knockout. And it all happens within the browser. You get the right code in the browser, run it in the browser. It's really a nice tutorial. I wish more of these frameworks would offer that kind of tutorial because it's one of the best tutorials I've seen. But even the tutorial, in the course of the tutorial, will reach a point where you need some routing, and they sort of hack their way into routing, and then they fall back and say, you know what, Knockout's not good at routing. The Knockout guys say, we're not good at routing, and they recommend you use another framework that is good at routing. They recommend Sammy, but certainly Backbone is another great option, and in fact, that leads me to Knockback. Not my idea, that's what they called it. It's basically what Knockback is Knockout plus Backbone plus some additional Knockback-specific features. Knockback itself is actually quite thin, but what it does bring together is Backbone and Knockout. It gives you Backbone's, trying to figure out what I meant to say there. It gives you Backbone's model, Backbone's routing. It gives you Knockback's yeah, actually, these are just extensions. I misread that. I'm sorry. It gives you some extensions to Backbone, some extensions to Knockout itself. It gives you some Knockback-specific navigation support, but at the end and under the covers, it's essentially just using Backbone models, Backbone routing, Backbone views, letting Knockout handle the model view routing stuff. Now, the community extent of this is unclear. I only know about it because in my course of getting to know Knockout, I saw references to it, and I went and looked at it and realized that this is a good way of bringing Knockout and Backbone together. It's MIT licensed. It's 8K itself. That's with no dependencies. That's that's Knockback itself. But it's 32K if you get the full stack, which is what you really need, because that's what brings in Backbone underscore and the thing that really makes it big, Knockout itself, at its 14-point-something K. Again, models, this is coming straight from Backbone. The views coming straight from Backbone. It's the same concept. It's exactly like writing a Backbone view. It's exactly like writing a Backbone model. But it's using Knockout's view models. It's using Backbone's routers. It's using not Backbone's views. It's using Knockout's views, Backbone's models, Knockout's view models, Backbone's routers. You get all the benefit of routing, all the benefit of a proper model object, but also all the magic data binding that Knockout gives you. I was going to show you a demo at this point, but quite honestly, it's just that to-do demo, and you've already seen pieces of it as I showed you Knockout and Backbone. It's just imagine those two examples brought together. So again, Knockback brings in Backbone to define the model. The view is the same with Knockout. It's just HTML, just content with those attributes on those elements. And the model view, very much the same thing as Knockout. And then Backbone-style routers, which is something that Knockout themselves acknowledge they're not good at, to help you navigate around a page going from different screens on that page to another. Definitely MVVM. I will give it the full-blown MVVM name here because Knockout gives you the VVM, Backbone brings the model, and it is probably Knockback is a more closely an MVVM framework than Knockout itself. Briefly, we'll talk about Sammy. Sammy's a weird little fellow. It's one of the first ones I actually became familiar with, not because it was the first one I Googled and found. It's just a friend of mine had been talking about Sammy for quite some time, and he said nodded and smiled and ignored him. And then I came back finally when I was really interested in getting involved in some JavaScript coding. I started looking at it first. And it was neat. I liked it. And I'll tell you why I liked it. If you looked at the code, it's certainly not Spring MVC. It's not. But there's a lot of parallels in how you write a Sammy controller versus how you write a Spring MVC controller. And I say Sammy controller with a sort of a hesitant feeling because it's really not a controller, but it still feels like you're writing Spring MVC. It is extremely straightforward and easy to learn, I found. Again, MIT license and very small, 6K and gzipped, but it is also a modular library. You can build onto it, build extensions on top of it, and they encourage you to do that. And of course, those extensions grow the footprint size. Now, this doesn't have the standard MVC layout, or MV star layout for that matter. It has views, it has routes, and it has events. It's very different than what we've talked about so far. it doesn't provide for the model at all. In fact, most of the examples I've seen for Sammy are using just plain JavaScript objects. So this is a situation where maybe you want to have a Sammy back or something, I don't know, where you get the model benefits of Backbone with everything else in Sammy. I really would strongly recommend that you not use Sammy as is and you bring in something else to help you with the model, because actually that's one of the nicest features of most of these frameworks is the fact that the model deals with some of those validation and persistence options or details for you. Views are defined just simply templates rendered in the DOM, which is kind of weird. If you start looking at the DOM for a Sammy app, and I'll show you one briefly in a moment, it's actually script tags with HTML in them. It's the weirdest thing you'll ever see. That's just how they work. Actually, a lot of other frameworks and a lot of other templating engines follow that same approach. Sammy definitely does. There is no really direct representation of a controller or presenter, although a lot of times people write Sammy code in a way that you kind of see the controller or presenter in there. Sammy itself does not define that. It's really left up to the developer to, if you want to do this in an MVC style, it's up to you to structure your code that way. But Sammy doesn't require you to do that. It's probably the least opinionated framework of all the ones I'm showing you, in that it leaves a lot of things left to you to define. You could think of its routing and event handling to be part of the controller story, but it's not the complete controller story, so it's not quite there. And I can't accurately describe it as MV star. I just can't under the circumstance. Maybe it's EVR, maybe it's star V star. I don't know what you would call it. It's not MV star. That's for sure. Let's pull up that Sammy app. And the Sammy app, if I recall right, is not part of the To-Do MVC's main set of examples. It's under their labs examples. I don't think that they've actually pulled it up to the top level yet. No, they haven't. So if you come in here and you look at the index.html file, this is the one that's going to be the most fun to look at. What we see in here is just standard HTML, not a whole lot going on there. But the templates, well, the templates are these things. They're not terribly exciting. I'm trying to find the one that's interesting. There it is. It's HTML. There it is. Just HTML with some scriptlet stuff in it. The Sammy code itself is, again, rather small, much like the Knockout. It's fully contained in one class, or actually one file, not a class, but one module. And what we have here is, hey, anytime you have a GET request on 404, this is what you're going to do. Anytime you have a GET request on list ID, this is what you're going to do. And if you're familiar with Spring MVC, this line here looks a heck of a lot like a request mapping. And everything that follows it looks a heck of a lot like a Spring MVC controller handler method. And so that's why I found it enjoyable to work with, because it just felt like I was writing a Spring MVC controller. That said, if you look up higher, again, there is no controller class. There's not a class here at all that represents a controller or a presenter or anything like of the such. It's just here's a bunch of routes, here's what they're going to do. That's really all it is. But it feels like Spring MVC in a way, just written in JavaScript. And then it leaves, again, everything else left to chance. It's up to you, the developer, to figure out how that stuff's going to work. It's up to you, the developer, to figure out what the model's going to look like. In the Sammy's case, in this example's case, it's just a plain JavaScript object. You're going to probably want to pull in something like the models from Backbone to do that, or some other framework that may deal with models really well. Okay. Again, this is what I just said. Consider mixing in the pieces from other frameworks. Certainly the model and collection are a good example of that. You might want to also consider the possibility of looking and mixing in some other types of templates with Sammy as opposed to using their standard HTML approach, which I found a little uncomfortable, but regardless. Turns out I'm actually finishing well on time. Some closing thoughts. Be sure and look at this to-do list example. There's the URL for it down at the bottom. Be sure and check it out. There are far more examples of the to-do list, the exact same application implemented in several places. In fact, if you look here, we have, just in the labs alone, we have Batman, CanJS, Cujo, Derby.js, Dijon, whatever. By the way, Batman, one of my favorite, not because it's a great framework. There's nothing wrong with it. It's great. It's actually quite similar to Spine in its programming model. I just like it because of its name. Backbone's a great name, and they don't have any sort of, unlike Spine though, where there is Spine Mobile, Batman doesn't have a mobile extension. If they did, I would hope it would be called Batmobile. But, and then we can go on and say, okay, for the phone-specific Bat phone, and maybe for messaging Bat Signal. I don't know, something, we could have all sorts of fun with that. But notice there's several different implementations of the to-do list example. There's several, and that's just in the labs. Here we have several different ones that are not in the labs but are in the proper form. You start digging around, there's actually examples in here of how to do even some of the same ones, Thorax and Knockout, using different types of dependency resolution, using NPM and different types of modularization approaches. So there's lots of stuff to look at, and the nice thing about this approach is somebody has done all the work for you. They've gone off and they've developed the same app where you can compare one framework and another framework side by side. And that's wonderful and gives you a great opportunity to get to know how these frameworks are laid out. Definitely consider scaffolding options. Much the same reason I would recommend using either in Spring MVC, for Spring MVC, using either Spring Roo or using Spring Source Tool Suite's templates to help get you started quickly. Don't try to set up a project by hand. It's just no fun. Nobody wants to do a make dir all day long to get started. You want to just get started. So Thorax brings that to the table. Spine.app brings it specifically for Spine. Thorax, again, specifically for the Thorax framework. Grunt and Brunch are for Backbone. Ember is obviously for Ember. Angular is obviously for Angular. UA Project is obviously for UI, Yahoo UI. And there's probably others out there. These are just a handful that I ran across. Know your modularization options. The ones I would focus on, these are all interesting approaches to JavaScript modularity. Everybody has a take on that. Not nearly as many people who have written their own frameworks, but still quite a few people have their different takes on modularization, but there's a handful of these that are definitely kind of leading the pack. AMD, it's the one that more people are kind of leaning toward because it feels good on the client. It allows the client to do the resolution sort of dynamically, and whereas opposed to CommonJS, it's more inclined for the server. If you're actually running server-side JS using Node or something like that, CommonJS seems to be a better fit on the server than AMD would be on the client. CommonJS, as we saw with Spine, is also used at compilation time in a lot of these. Now, interestingly enough, Thorax doesn't use any of these. They sort of follow their own approach. It's very similar to how CommonJS and AMD work, but it's still very different. I would encourage you to get to know these options, though. And one great way of getting to know them is to start off by looking at Require.js. Require has a really good set of documentation out there, and they even go to great lengths to tell you how they support both AMD, CommonJS, and how you can actually define your modules to be both AMD compliant and CommonJS compliant. You'll want to keep your eye on ES Harmony, which is the attempt to sort of formalize, standardize the modularization story. Certainly we have some guys here with Spring who have done Wire.js and curl. Those are great and worth looking into as well. And then there's a handful of others I just mentioned just because I was aware of them. You'll need some other stuff too, though. It's not just about these frameworks. I said there's an entire ecosystem forming around this stuff, and there's a lot of other things you want to look at. You're going to definitely want to write some tests. Jasmine is a good option for doing that, for doing BDD-style testing with your JavaScript. You also have some other things like JQ-unit or JS-unit that have been around for much longer than Jasmine, but Jasmine gives you a really good feel for doing BDD development. There's another one I haven't actually tried, but I'm intrigued by it. It's called, what's his name? Buster. It's called Buster. And the reason I like Buster primarily is because he has a crash test dummy, and I'm a big fan of Mythbusters, and so it just, it caught my attention. They have a crash test dummy as their logo. And so Buster essentially helps you do some testing that's more browser specific. Again, I've not done a whole lot with it. I've just kind of read a little bit about it. It looks intriguing, though. You're going to want to deal with client-side caching. You don't want to necessarily push data from your server. I mean, this is all about the reason I even presented this to you in the first place. It's all about creating a rich client that's in front of something on the server, such as Spring MVC REST API. But you don't want to be calling that REST API all the time. It's not good on the server. It's not good on the bandwidth. It's not good on the client experience because it's going to slow down the behavior in the client. This is especially true if you're dealing with a mobile app and somebody's on the 3G network using their iPhone. They're not going to have as pleasant of an experience using your app if you're hitting the server all the time. So as much as you can, you want to look at some caching options on the client. There's a handful of libraries out there that help you with that. They often just use local storage as a means of caching, so you want to look at that. Push the client, things like WebSockets, things like some of the other things we saw, the socket.js, things like that we've seen last night. A great way of pushing messages that happen on the server to the client. Offline handling. What are you going to do if you're writing a mobile application using these JavaScript libraries and somebody is on a plane and they don't have access? What are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? The cheap, easy way of handling it is just tell them, sorry, you can't use my app right now. You're not online. But a more clever approach would be to create some sort of queuing where if somebody takes an action, you put it into a queue, and as soon as they do go online, you basically push that action through the queue and take it against the server. So there's some libraries that are being built. I haven't seen one that's really complete yet, but I've seen some libraries being built to kind of solve that problem. And local storage help. Local storage is actually quite easy to work with, but the downside of local storage is you have to write a string, and if you don't have a string to work with, you need help getting whatever it is you're wanting to store into a string. A simple thing to do there is to take the JavaScript object and write it as a JSON string. But there's also some libraries out there. One that comes to mind immediately is one called LawnChair. And LawnChair actually takes an approach of give it any object you want. It will not only make sure it can get into local storage, but if local storage for some reason is not available on the browser you're on, it will attempt other methods of storing this for long-term use, for local use. So you might want to look at LawnChair. And no, I'm not going to tell you which one of these to use. Again, there's a huge list of them. They're all fantastic. I like them all. There's not a right or wrong choice. The choice you make is often contextual. Who are you? What are your skills? What's your team skills? What project are you doing? What are your goals on your project? Are you going to be mobile or not? Are your developers JavaScript freaks, or are they scared to death of JavaScript? Do you have a mix of developers? Do you want to go lightweight as possible, using the minimal amount of JavaScript necessary, something like Knockout where you don't have any model class to help you? It's certainly beneficial in the sense that it's lightweight, or would you rather have framework support for that kind of stuff? Is there any built-in mobile support, or are you going to be rolling your own mobile? Are you going to be trying to figure out how to wire up jQuery mobile with Backbone, which, by the way, there's about a dozen different approaches to that, and I haven't found one that works for me yet. Everybody has a different approach on that, and usually it has to do with different versions, and so that can be kind of a challenge. Or is there something about the framework that gives you built-in mobile support, something like Spine Mobile has done? Which one feels right to you? And that's really an important one. They all feel good. I like them all, but some of them just feel more natural to me. They're the ones I enjoy working with more because they just fit my development style. And they may fit your team's development style. So again, I can't tell you which one to use any more than I can tell you whether you should drink a Coke, Diet Coke, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, or Pepsi. I can't tell you that. It's your choice. Now, what would I use? Well, I'm still not going to tell you what you should use, but I will tell you what I have done. I've got a little toy project I've been playing with for about a year, mostly just to get my head around how these things work. And I chose Spine. I chose Spine because it gave me a really quick getting started story. It gave me a really good mobile story. And I've been happy with it. It's worked well. But I'm also very intrigued by Thorax and Backbone and how they work, especially the lumbar piece of that story where I can spray out individual websites for the different devices I want to target. And I really like Knockout, although, like I said, I haven't found a good need to use Knockout on its own. I can see where I might use Knockout in concert with Spine or with Backbone. And certainly if I'm going to do that, I'm intrigued by Knockback. And if I'm going to go with core Backbone and I need the Knockout features, I'm going to consider that. And that said, I am done with time. I'm also done with slides. So if you have any questions, feel free to meet me at the podium or ask them right now. Otherwise, thank you very much. Have a great rest of the conference. Hope to see you tomorrow.